Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the Crypto Rundown. It is Ethereum ETF Day, and we had to bring Brendan and a special guest, Bryce, to show us everything that's going on in the news and breaking down the charts. Brendan, what do you have for us today?
Yeah, we finally have the Ethereum spot ETF approvals here in the States. We have $19 trillion worth of asset managers across 8 different sources that have come together to make this thing possible. Now, a lot of analysts are predicting anywhere from $5 to $10 billion in inflows by the end of this year. You better bet that we're going to be covering everything that you need to know, what we are expecting in terms of price appreciation or depreciation. And then finally, we have a lot of news on the Solana front as well. We have other TradFi managers that are coming in, building on Solana. So, man, there's a lot to talk about in today's rundown.
Absolutely. And while trillion-dollar asset managers like BlackRock are flying to the Ethereum ETF today, retail interest is actually at a 3-year low and 50% off the highs in March. So we're going to break down that, give you the playbook of what we see for the next 3 months and through the rest of the year. Guys, the timestamps are below, so you can watch what you want to watch when you want to watch it. Thanks for listening and enjoy the episode.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Crypto Market Rundown, where we talk about everything that's happening in the great world of cryptocurrency, from the fundamental in the news to the technicals on the charts. We spend the time doing hours of research so that you all don't have to. And today is a very special day in the crypto markets because after years of working and waiting and pushing for adoption, we are finally getting it on a level that we have never seen before, because today is the day that the Ethereum spot ETFs launch inside the United States, and the flows have already begun. In fact, we're going to take a look at them inside today's episode. We're going to be telling you everything that you need to know about the Ethereum ETFs. We're going to talk about Solana and the Solana ETFs, backend infrastructure, and just everything that's happening. And of course, we're taking a look at the charts as well and how prices are responding to all of this, because we were talking about it in last week's episode as well. Now, what does this mean? Well, the Ethereum spot ETFs have been something that people have been wanting for forever, because what this does is this allows institutional adoption to people who would have never previously had access to crypto, people who have a BlackRock account, people who have a Fidelity account or a VanEck or Bitwise, the list goes on. People who might have 401ks and retirements accounts, and these people who just are not as tech savvy. Now, some of those people might already have crypto exposure, which is great, but a lot of them don't, and they're happy with their current asset managers. They're happy keeping things simple, and they don't want to overcomplicate the process. And now that they are able to get access to not only Bitcoin, as of today, also Ethereum, they're going to have a really easy, reliable source that they trust, that they have used for probably decades, that they can now seamlessly go and buy cryptocurrency. So what we're seeing here is adoption in the most literal sense. It's not just Bitcoin anymore. It's not just the largest crypto. The TradFi giants, I guess you could say, are now very interested in the altcoin market. In fact, from these 8 different ETF providers that we're going to talk about, they have about 19 billion, or excuse me, not billion, $19 trillion in assets under management. Now, I want you to think about that for a moment, because when we look at the entire size of the crypto space, it's only about 2.5 trillion. And I think it's funny that I'm saying only 2.5 trillion. It's quite large these days, but in comparison to how big some of these asset managers are, it's still dwarfed. There is so much more capital and money that can come into the space, that can flow in and can make it move upwards still several times fold. Now, again, there's a lot of catalysts, there's a lot of news, there's a lot of intricacies that we want to talk about. But before we do that, I don't want to rant too much here. I want to welcome the rest of the guys, because we got a loaded house. And if there's any day for this, it's a day like today. So we're joined. I'll pass it over to Captain TiVo first, and we also got another very special guest.
Yeah, special day, special guest. Bryce, welcome.
Hey guys, yeah, happy to be here. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. Well, if there's any day that we needed the command station full of all of us, it's a day like today.
It's all
we
hands
do
on
this.
deck.
We like to have everyone in here, especially at these kind of big events. But man, these Ethereum ETFs, they're exciting. And, we were talking about it before this. We've been talking about this for months now, right? We saw the initial filings, I think it's the 19B-4 filings from a few months ago. And those got approved, which essentially enable Ethereum to be like an approved ETF. But it wasn't able to be tradable until today. We got the S1 approvals here recently, and these things are live. And again, we're going to take a look at what these flows look like, because we're already seeing hundreds of millions of dollars in flows. In fact, we saw over $100 million in flows and volume in just the first 15 minutes, which is crazy. But Bryce, I know you got a bunch of material for us as well. I want to pass it off to you and kind of see what you're seeing in the wake of this.
No, I mean, hey, it was a great introduction, and it is a very momentous day. Everything that you said, I second and more. And a lot of people are just trying to anticipate, Bitcoin is, about, or Ethereum is about a third the size of Bitcoin. So everybody's kind of saying, well, typically asset managers, they market cap weight their investments. So, people are anticipating a third of the flows essentially into the Ethereum ETF that we got for Bitcoin. So it's sort of, easy math in theory, but is that actually playing out in practice? And I want to pull up a chart from Matthew Siegel, who actually works at VanEck, which is one of the issuers. And he was noting, again, this is just in the first 90 minutes, but he was saying that there is already about more than 50% of the trade volume for these ETFs for Ethereum relative to Bitcoin. So you could see here, Ethereum ETFs, just in the first 90 minutes of trading, have done $320 million in volume relative to the $610 million in volume for Bitcoin. So if this is any anticipation of where we're going in the future, there might actually be 50% of the flows into Ethereum relative to Bitcoin. So that would be an incredible move. And if you're kind of taking a look at who are the buyers, like you mentioned, is it the retail guys? Is it the institutions? I think it's really a blend of both. It is those folks who have those retail accounts set up, but it's also folks who are institutional investors who are looking at the space and saying, we need to allocate to this. And it's not just Ethereum. Ethereum kind of opened up the floodgates for all the other altcoins. And this has been something that I've been talking a lot about, and others have as well. But now that the regulatory groundwork has been laid, folks like Nate Garachi, who are like the leading ETF analysts in the world, president of the ETF store, host ETF Prime, an awesome podcast / radio show. He's actually predicting that this is going to now open up the floodgates for many, many other crypto-related ETFs, spot-related. And he actually thinks that Solana is up next. And there was a quote from Reuters as well that we don't have up here, but there's a quote from Reuters about how they're addressing the institutional demand now with Solana. It was somebody from SIBO that said that in Reuters. And so, Nate's prediction is that we're actually going to get Ethereum ETFs, Bitcoin ETFs, and Solana ETFs. And in fact, they're going to combine all three of the coins into one ETF. And to me, that's really, really exciting, because now we have the regulatory playbook for altcoins. Altcoins can now be wrapped up and traded on the New York Stock Exchange or the NASDAQ or wherever they're listed. And that's a really, really incredible movement. I think that's going to boost the liquidity for crypto. And so, everybody's kind of going and buying Ethereum on this. I think actually the trade is to kind of buy Solana or other altcoins for kind of the real trade. And even one of my favorite fund managers, Austin Barak from Relayer Capital, he noted in this tweet, he goes, I just want to remind everyone that Solana is actually only 3% of the, or 3.36% of the total market cap of crypto. ETH is 17.75 and Bitcoin is over half. So he says he expects the market will correct this in the next 12 months because under 10% is insane for Solana when you consider it's on par or even exceeds Ethereum in so many key usage metrics. And so that's what's really key is that, Solana's market cap is still so small, but it has more users. It has more transaction volume practically on a daily basis. It's got more, excitement surrounding it in terms of DPIN and meme coins and NFTs. And it just seems like the activity metrics on Solana are just continuing to skyrocket. Even the Solana relative to ETH and the Solana relative to Bitcoin, the price charts, Solana's been outperformant. And so I think that people are actually selling, or what do they call it? Buy the rumor, sell the news. And you buy the rumor that Ethereum is kind of going to be getting listed, and then it's confirmed. So you sell Ethereum, you sell the news. And the new rumor is that there's going to be a Solana ETF. And so you buy the rumor, and then you sell Solana once it gets listed. And so that's kind of how I'm thinking about it. That's how I'm kind of playing it. I've heard from other hedge fund managers. That's how they're playing it as well. So it is interesting, to think that Solana is still so small. And at the end of the day, many people are looking at this as the next sort of big thing. So that's kind of how I'm thinking about it. I think Solana is going to be, the outperformer. If we're kind of taking a look at the top three sort of cryptocurrencies, Sol, BTC, and ETH, I think Sol's going to be the winner in the short term. Now, in the long term, it's anybody's guess. But what do you kind of think, just at a high level, kind of high level takeaway, Brendan? What do you think about that?
Yeah, it's funny because we were talking about this yesterday. We were saying, look at Solana's metrics compared to things like Bitcoin and Ethereum. And it seems like other analysts are kind of seeing this as well. They're saying, look at its user count, look at its activity, look at its DEX volume, look at its transaction count, and all of these things. And there have been a number of days this year where Solana is outperforming Bitcoin or Ethereum in a lot of these metrics. And so when we look at it and we're saying, okay, well, if it's outperforming it on all of these key metrics that we like to look at for health, why is it only 3% of the crypto's market cap when Ethereum is almost 18% and Bitcoin is over 55%? It doesn't necessarily make a lot of sense. And we've already seen, and we've talked about how Van Eck has applied for a Solana ETF, and 21 Shares has applied for a Solana ETF. And again, with the approval and listing of the Ethereum spot ETFs, it kind of opens the floodgates for all these different altcoin ETFs. And a lot of the barriers that were previously there have been removed because the Ethereum ETFs worked its way through, and it had to solve and kind of fix a lot of those kinks, a lot of those roadblocks that would have been there for Solana. Now, it's not all of them, right? Solana is still a little bit different from Ethereum, but a lot of the roadblocks needed to get removed in order for things like Bitcoin and Ethereum to be listed in the first place, which is a huge step in the right direction. And so everyone's kind of asking here, what does this mean for the whole crypto space? At the time of recording this, the crypto markets are kind of pulling back across the board. Bitcoin's down about 2%, Ethereum's down about 1%, Solana's down about 3.5%, and so on and so forth. The general crypto market is red, maybe 2 to 4%, depending on the project. And so people are like, why in the world would we be pulling back today? And we're going to get into that. But I think the big takeaway here is that this is a net positive for the crypto space going forward. And we talked about this.
Yeah, and the flows are going to be out of control. I mean, if you think about, I saw a report from Citi, Citigroup, Citibank. They're predicting right around $5 billion of inflows. One of the other analysts that we saw, Tom Dunleavy, was predicting somewhere between $8 and $10 billion. And that's just within this next, 6 to 12 month period. Those are serious numbers.
Yeah, I mean, by the end of this year. I mean, that's what they're looking. They're saying, hey, by the end of this year, we could see on the, maybe conservative side, like you said with Citi, $5 billion. Mm-hmm. But then there's other analysts, someone that we've talked to personally a number of times, Tom Dunleavy, who's saying, I think we could do even more than that. And I love the initial metrics that you put up, Bryce, because these things are already outpacing expectations. We are saying, okay, maybe they'll do a third of what Bitcoin did. And in reality, we're closer to 50%. So they're doing about half of what Bitcoin did. And that just makes a really strong argument for appreciation here. Now, one of the other cool things I want to flash up is just what happened in the first 15 minutes of these Ethereum ETFs because the volumes are crazy. And actually, this chart took me by surprise here. And so what we saw is that, I think most people probably expected Bitcoin, or not Bitcoin, a BlackRock or Fidelity to maybe lead the charge in terms of volume here. But that really actually wasn't what we saw. And so I want to go ahead and flash this up on the screen for everyone. And a quick reminder that if you are trying to look at all the visuals that we're talking about, you need to go over to the YouTube channel. It's the Crypto 101 podcast on YouTube. So if you're an Audible listener or Spotify or Apple Podcasts or anything like that, again, go over to our YouTube channel, and there you're going to be able to see all of the visuals and the charts that we are referencing on the screens here. Now, this is coming from Eric. He's one of the lead Bloomberg intelligence analysts on ETFs. And inside this picture, we saw that $112 million was traded in the first 15 minutes of these Ethereum spot ETFs going live. And at the very top of the list here, we have Grayscale being number one. I think that this is kind of expected, right? Because people have had their money wrapped up in these things and unable to sell for so long. But number two was Bitwise, from Matt Hogan, someone, again, that we've had on here before. We've talked to him. He is a awesome gentleman who we're going to have back on. But Bitwise is leading the charge at number two, which puts them above BlackRock, as you can see, above Fidelity, above Van Eck, and above Invesco and Franklin Templeton and 21 Shares and all these other big providers. So I think this is really cool. Again, in the first 15 minutes of trading, there was $112 million in volume for these ETFs alone.
Still a lot of game left to be played. We'll admit it.
Yeah. Oh, exactly. And I think the one big takeaway that I want everyone to have is that there is so much attention and excitement about these things. They're already, surpassing our expectations. And we're excited to see what happens in the month, the 2 months following the ETF, just like we saw with Bitcoin. And I want to flash up a chart of this here because I think it's important to kind of just visualize what happened to Bitcoin during the same kind of time period. So if we look at, and give me 1 second to pull this up, but if we look at what happened to Bitcoin kind of during this same period here, then we can see that right after the Bitcoin ETFs got approved, and I'm going to remove this watermark real fast, but right after the Bitcoin ETF got approved, it saw a pullback right here from around 40K or 50K, down to 38K. Short little pullback, a few weeks of downwards movement. But what happened in about the 2 months after this was a 92% rally in the price of Bitcoin to a new all-time high. So now I'm looking at the Ethereum ETF here and saying, are we going to see something similar where we get an initial sell-off, an initial pullback, maybe some short-term downside? Mm-hmm. But what's going to happen a month from now? What's going to happen 6 months from now? What's going to happen a year from now? Because we've seen what happens once the initial people who want to sell, the initial people who want to get out of Grayscale and these other things, and they want to take their profits, once they're done, the inflows continued with Bitcoin. And that's what led to this giant rally. And, I'm very interested to see what happens with Ethereum as well, because if you can't tell, we're pretty optimistic on it. There's a lot of stuff to kind of look forward to over here.
Yeah, I couldn't be more excited as well. But also, like we mentioned, I mean, Solana is taking some attention. I saw Hamilton Lane just became the first asset manager to actually launch a tokenized fund on Solana. And Hamilton Lane, I mean, they might not be a household name like Fidelity or BlackRock, but they do manage $920 billion. Almost a full trillion. I'm sure they're going to get there as people realize that they are very cutting edge and forward-looking. But what do you make of this?
Well, I'll tell you what, I think they're going to get to $1 trillion after this product launches on Solana.
I think so, dude. At the very least, it's a great sort of marketing play, right? I mean, people in the traditional financial institution world kind of looking at this and saying, okay, well, these guys are pretty cutting edge. They're like how BlackRock launched a fund on Ethereum, they're doing a similar play on Solana. So to me, I've got my eyes on Hamilton Lane. That's a new follow for me on Twitter.
I was going to bring up that exact point of this reminds me of BlackRock's Biddle Fund, right? They came out, they said, hey, we're going to be building on Ethereum. And now all of a sudden these Solana ETFs start coming to the spotlight. They start becoming more popular. Their odds of approval are probably going up. And then we already have TradFi players coming out and probably seeing the success and the strategy that BlackRock is doing. And we've always said, like, they're the standard. They're the largest asset manager on the planet. They set the pace and the tempo and the standard for everyone else. And so they probably saw what BlackRock was doing. They said, we want to beat you to Solana. Since you're already doing this on Ethereum, we can't beat you there. But what we can do is get ahead of you on the Solana front.
Yeah.
And so here they are, and they're doing this. And I'm really stoked to see what this means. And again, it goes back to the idea of what we were talking about earlier, saying, look at the metrics. Look at how well Solana has been performing. In terms of technical and fundamentals.
Yeah.
Its price has been outperforming a lot of lower market cap projects. People generally go to lower market cap projects, smaller projects, newer projects, because they say, okay, I want to increase my risk, or excuse me, I want to increase my reward, but I also need to increase my risk to do that. And recently what we've seen, especially over the last year, is that Solana has been lower risk, yet higher reward. Because it is one of the larger market cap projects. It is very well known. It has a fairly decent reputation. It's done a lot better in recent years than where it was a couple of years ago. But despite all of that, it's still outperforming a lot of newer, smaller projects. So people are going to a larger, more reputable project, but still seeing really, really good results.
Yeah.
And I think it's made Solana kind of stand out over here.
And I think even with people, like, now that the Ethereum ETF and people are talking about Solana, like, people need to understand the Bitcoin inflows into the ETF have not really slowed down much. I saw just the other day they did another $500 million in volume, of net inflows. So that's still an incredible number, right, to get to. And we're already 6 months out from launch, and they're still taking in massive amounts of new capital. So that's just now an engine that's kind of churning in the background. And one of these guys who I like to follow, a guy named Rick Edelman, he's the largest independent RIA, or largest independent registered investment advisor in America. I think he manages up to somewhere around $200 billion in client funds. And, he said that the Ethereum or the Bitcoin ETF is going to launch Bitcoin to $420,000. Based on, allocators globally, if they just had 1% of their assets in Bitcoin, it would launch it to $420,000 per coin. And so that's still an engine that's running in the background. And I still think Bitcoin has, a piece of everybody's portfolio, or it should have a piece of everybody's portfolio, because at the end of the day, it is very different from Ethereum. It's very different from everything. And even Larry Fink, who's the CEO of BlackRock, he's going on CNBC and Fox Business talking about how this is a hedge against political uncertainty and sort of governmental oppression worldwide. And he's not saying, strictly in America, although it does apply to America. But he's just saying, Bitcoin is kind of the escape hatch or the pressure valve, right, for people all around the world who want to escape a oppressive government who's taxing people in a hidden way through inflation, or who are having these capital controls where you can't move money the way you want to move money. And so there's still a real big groundswell of support coming for Bitcoin. So all in all, like Nate said on his tweet, I think an incredible ETF application would be for all three tokens combined in one. You got it up right here. The Bitcoin ETF inflows. Sure, there was a lull in the end of June, beginning of July, but things are starting to peak back up. So that's a really good sign.
Yeah, I mean, look at the past 2 weeks here, even 3 weeks. Where are the outflows? They're non-existent.
Yeah,
the outflows are gone. I mean, here's probably some of the biggest days that we've seen: 50, 60, 70 million in outflows. But then look at the inflows: 300 million, 250, 150, 100, 300, 300, 420, 427. Like the inflows here are just stacking, and you can see that the inflows are on the rise and the outflows are on the decline. The sellers are exhausted. I think a lot of the people who wanted to sell, who wanted to get out of their Bitcoin ETF positions, I think a lot of them are out, because if we zoom out, we can see that the outflows have just been dwindling, especially over the last month or even couple months. The outflows are kind of like non-existent anymore, and the inflows are back on the rise. And to me, that tells me that the bulls are taking back control of this market here.
And one of the data points that you showed me before we hopped on was about, retail interest kind of at lows, which is surprising because of all these inflows, right? And so it makes you think, well, if it's not retail who's here and buying, it's these institutions that are actually currently setting their positions. Yeah, this is a great chart. Yeah, walk us through what you see here.
Yeah, so basically what I've seen, and I know we've covered one side of this before, has been like kind of the Google trends, which we kind of all agree aren't as, maybe reliable as they used to be back in the day, but I still kind of stand on that. I think it is an important part of seeing like just kind of the FOMO stage, like maybe towards the end, because you kind of saw in March, like the Google trends kind of ripped up towards that March high. And so this is kind of the 30-day change in transfer volume for transactions under 10K. So I think for this guy, that's basically what he's designating as a retail trader, smaller investment size or smaller size trades. And so you're seeing those in the red basically plummet off. The hype was there in March for sure, but it went away fast, and it kind of felt like that everybody might have piled in again a little bit, and then kind of caught that nasty correction that we had. But the big boys seem to be here to stay, and they want to keep playing. And I feel like what Brendan said when he went back and showed the Bitcoin ETF and how we had that small correction after that aired, like, is the playbook there for ETH again, like he mentioned? And then you compare that with kind of what we saw, again, not to get too political, but what we saw with the Trump assassination attempt. The market kind of showed you that playbook of like, okay, Trump's a super favorite now. And the market kind of rallied on that. So you have two kind of playbooks. One's a historical one with the Bitcoin ETF that happened 6 months ago. And then one was a forward-looking one with they call it the Trump trade. And obviously there's things changing in that, and that's never a guarantee. But you kind of have these two things that have maybe showed you a little bit behind the curtain of what could be towards the end of this year and into next year. So I wonder what you guys thought about that.
Yeah, I think what it tells me is that, the institutions are here, they're buying, and the fact that, prices have been really if you even look at like volatility, measure it by Bollinger Bands on a weekly scale, it's at like an all-time low. So volatility is at an all-time low. Retail interest and participation is at a 3-year low. It just tells me that the market's consolidating, which makes sense because if you look at the chart, we're in a very clear bull flag consolidation. This is bullish consolidation. This is, market participants kind of consolidating their position. What Brennan, you call it, fishing, order fishing, right? They're trying to get the lowest possible price before they, finally fill their bags and then break out above all-time highs and start to really, rev back up the marketing engine. And, there's a famous, saying is like, what do they call it? Fill, then shill. Meaning, you fill your bags and then you shill your bags after you're filled. Which is, kind of like a tongue-in-cheek thing that people say about, they go on CNBC and you're not telling everybody, go buy until you've also bought. Now, I don't know if I agree with that, but it is something that you notice in market participants. And so I think that this is a classic case of fill, then shill. This is all of the deep-pocketed institutions just being quiet. They want the best possible price. They're saying, hey, we're just going to let the market play out, and they're not getting retail super jazzed up, super excited. A lot of retail's like, well, Bitcoin's been trending down to sideways. There's not much excitement. So you could see, again, that volatility compressed. But that is sort of an unsustainable trend because low periods of volatility always beget high periods of volatility, and high periods of volatility always beget low periods of volatility, and so on and so forth. It's a cycle. And so we're in a low volatility period. There's low retail participation and interest. on chain. On Bitcoin particularly. But that's going to change. I mean, mark my words, once we get Bitcoin back above that $74,000 price point, everybody and their brother starting to talk about, oh my God, did you guys see this? Did you see this? And then they're going to start making their transactions. It's going to be, it's going to be a whole new world. But I think right now it's just the institutions consolidating their positions.
Yeah, I always found it interesting how many people contact me after new all-time highs are hit,
Right.
and how few people want to talk to me about it after a pullback, after a red day, especially when the markets are down double digits. And it's almost the reverse psychology of what it should be the majority of the time. But if we throw up the Bitcoin chart and the Ethereum chart, and we just kind of take a look at all this stuff. I know everyone likes it when we go over the charts over here and just kind of show where we are at. This kind of pullback that we're seeing right now isn't anything too crazy. On Bitcoin, we're down about 4% from this local high. From an all-time high, we're only down about 10%. Now, what we're seeing here is that after this rally, we're right back in the middle of this previous channel. As Bryce said, volatility has been very low. And we're not talking about the short term. We're saying, hey, look at the last 5-6 months of activity. Ever since kind of the end of February, prices have just been going sideways for an extended period of time here. And we're just back inside the same channel that we were previously. Now, the good news here is that Bitcoin was bought up aggressively. Most cryptos were after this most recent dip. People were very hungry. The bulls were very eager to take control of this market. And Bitcoin's kind of pushing this all-time high, which really, again, is not that far away. Bitcoin only needs to rally about 11 to 12% to recontest those highs. And I saw that there was about $19 billion in short positions that would be liquidated if Bitcoin breaks above something like $72,400, which is wild. I mean, talk about shorts getting wrecked and bears getting destroyed. There'd be a lot of happy bulls. And that could be a catalyst, maybe a short squeeze or something like that. That could lead to this thing happening. And I imagine that people are going to be hitting us back up. People are probably going to be hitting all of you back up. Anyone that's in the crypto space and follows this stuff, you're probably going to have people reaching out to you after this breaks, when it does break, saying, hey, what's up with this Bitcoin thing? What's up with this Ethereum or Solana or this crypto thing? Should I be interested in it now? And your response is probably going to be, well, you should have been interested in it, a month ago or 6 months ago or, all this stuff. And, kind of what we're looking at moving forward here is, at least for myself, I'm very eager to be buying these dips. I think that the narrative of the institutional side is very much there and in support of the crypto industry, whether it's BlackRock building on Ethereum, whether it's, forget who the other group was, Hamilton Lane building on Solana, whether it's with Fidelity and Van Eck filing their ETFs. There is a lot of support for this industry. And I think the volume shows how much interest that there is there, again, surpassing expectations and seeing just how much attraction and inflows and how positive a response a lot of these ETFs have gotten so far. So if we look at Bitcoin here, I'm very excited to be buying up these dips, especially as we get a little bit of a retrace, which I still think is completely healthy after we went on with Bitcoin, what was a 26% rally in about a 2-week period. So I wouldn't be surprised if maybe we do retrace a little bit, whether that's down to maybe closer to 64K, or maybe that's back closer to this big area around 60K, which has been a support. And for Ethereum, again, this looks very similar. It's already retracing back down to its kind of previous consolidation lows right around 3,400, which is an area that we've seen it bounce a lot over the last week and a half. And even with Solana, seeing a little bit of a retracement. Now, this thing, again, has been on quite the upside move. It's already broken its primary downtrend resistance line from the highs, right? We saw the all-time high, followed by the lower swing high, followed by the next lower swing high, kind of this downtrend resistance. And Solana's already broken out of this. It's well above all of its moving averages. It prevented itself from falling to a lower low. This macro high from before, right? This macro resistance and top that it had has now turned into the low. And so this is what we like to call maybe a break, hook, and go, or a former resistance being retested as a newfound support level. It's a very healthy and positive thing to see that we saw in Solana. And, Ethereum's kind of in the same boat where, in the sense that it prevented itself from falling to a lower low, which is just an overall good thing to see. So as we're looking at the crypto markets kind of across the board, especially some of these large caps, we're really excited to see what happens. Needless to say, we're pretty optimistic about it. Maybe the 10 to 15 different positive news articles and charts and all that biased us a little bit. But man, I think all that is plenty of a reason to be excited about just everything that's going on at the moment.
Yeah, and yeah, I mean, you're totally right. The last thing that I had to kind of add to the conversation was, it's not just feelings that we're thinking of we're being bullish. It's actually supply and demand. And so you guys know Bitcoin had the halving, right, where it cuts the block reward in half. So now there's 3.25 Bitcoin that are mined every day instead of 6.25 or whatever it is. And so I just saw this stat while we were kind of like loading up for the podcast here, where BlackRock actually bought 28,100 Bitcoin in July so far. 28,100 Bitcoin in July so far. 9,900 or 9,900 Bitcoin were mined in that same time frame. So you have almost 3 times the amount of Bitcoin that one ETF is buying relative to the new supply that's coming online. So to me, over the long term, as Bitcoin's block reward, again, in 4 years, it's going to get cut in half yet again. And if you still maintain positive inflows, supply and demand should continue to rocket these prices higher. And Ethereum has their buyback and burn function based on sort of transaction activity. So the more I think that was EIP 1559. So the more transactions and activity that are going on the Ethereum network, the lower the overall supply actually becomes. So it's a deflationary asset, which is going to continue to move these prices higher. So it's a good time to be in the markets, man. It's a really good time to be a crypto buyer. I'm super positive for where we're going to go. Q3, Q4, I think it's going to be an incredibly fun time.
Yeah, I mean, just referencing what you were saying, Ethereum has been deflationary, not inflationary. It has been deflationary for the better part of the last 2 years, since fall of 2022, as you can see from this chart, which is just a whole nother reason. So you mentioned the Bitcoin halving and the supply and demand over there. I want to give everyone just like a visual chart so that they can help see and understand that it's not just Bitcoin that has supply and demand working in its favor, but it's also Ethereum. Arguably even more so because it's deflationary, or it has been deflationary up until very, very recently, for the better part of 2 years. So, man, we're excited to see everything that's happening over here. We appreciate everyone coming in and tuning in because there's a lot going on and it's hard to keep up with it all. Yeah. So if you want to stay up to date on everything that's happening in the world of cryptocurrency, we humbly believe that this is going to be your number one place to do it, whether it's the technicals on the charts or the fundamentals in the news. We love just going through and spending countless hours, in fact, days and days, gathering all this information so that you all can hop on, watch a little 20, 30, maybe an hour long little podcast and video here and get caught up to date on everything. So thank you all for tuning in. We got a lot more great content coming your way. Be sure to check out all of our other links. We got Crypt Nation, which is a great place to get plugged into a cryptocurrency community. We also got the YouTube channel, which is going to be the Crypto 101 podcast, where we have all sorts of interviews and tutorials and podcasts and a bunch of other market updates that come your way over there. So thank you all for watching, and we're going to see all of you at the same time, same place next week.